What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe and I, we are coming in hot with a good Q&A at the end of the episode, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Gabe, Eric had a really nice compliment for you this morning, dude. We're training, we're getting after it, and he goes, what do you say? He goes, what do you say verbatim? I sent you the video because he, like, out of nowhere, he's like, oh yeah, that session that we did with Gabe, the flex session, it was good. He doesn't even talk like that. The session we did with Gabe was good. But man, I gotta tell you, dude, Gabe, he's got muscles on top of muscles. He's lean and jacked. What is that what I said? Was that what I said to you?
Yeah, it was muscles on top of muscles, which I appreciate. It's funny because, like, I definitely don't think that that's true. There's levels to every game, including jack. But hey, man, I mean, one thing that I remember, one thing that I remember saying on, I'll take it, and I 100% appreciate it. But again, like, one thing that I said on the home team episode that I hope any guy out there that just wants to, like, change his physique, improve his physique, like, that really, really I hope hits home is that for a long time, I had convinced myself that I'm a hard gainer, always been an endurance guy. Like, I'm never going to be able to put on muscle because it's just not something that, like, was genetically gifted for. And that in many ways is true. There's a lot of other people out there that have looked a certain way forever and just more easily are able to accomplish that specific thing. I mean, you're someone like that who you've always been a big guy. You've always been a very muscular guy. You have huge arms. Like, that's been something that has come a little bit more naturally for you, where I know I've had to work and be very kind of like specific. Hey, this is something I want. But all that being said, as soon as I just, like, made the flip in my mind of, it's not that, like, I'm a hard gainer. It's not that, like, my genetics are the reason I can't put on muscle. It's just something that's very hard to do. And I'm going to have to be very consistent about it and intentional about it. And in the grand scheme of things, I haven't done anything crazy. I haven't, like, dedicated my entire life to, like, getting super jacked. Like, I've had 2 kids over the past 2 years. I've, hopefully you would agree to this, like, had advanced in, like, my career and focused on, like, how I perform as a professional. Like, I have plenty of other things going on. But all that being said, in a year and a half, I have completely changed the way my body looks. And I think that I hope is, whether it's, like, an inspirational testament to people that, like, yes, a year and a half sounds like a really long time because everyone wants results in, like, 30, 60 days. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not that long. And you can absolutely change how you look and how you feel by being consistent for, I would say, 9 to 12 months. Like, 9 to 12 months, you can absolutely, like, 180 night and day how you look and how you feel without having to be perfect, without having to track every single macro, without having to, like, train 6 times a week for 2 hours. Like, honestly, you can train 4 times a week for, like, 45 minutes, be consistent with your food, not perfect, and you can absolutely change. It's the whole saying of, like, people overestimate how much they can accomplish in 30 days, but they underestimate how they can accomplish in a year. And it's so true. And I hope that me sharing that is something that, like, wakes a couple people up of, like, okay, I'm not going to completely change how I look and how I feel in just 30 days. I'm not going to do, a 45-day challenge and something and completely get there. But if you're, like, consistent for a year, give yourself a year, and it is crazy what you can accomplish. I hope that that's what comes out of all that.
Yeah, man. Yep. I mean, we were just having a good conversation about Jack. We got to come up with, like, a name, but Jack Gabe. MDV wants me to come up with a name for this beef rice that I make, like Khalipa rice or something. I'm like, I don't know, dude, it's just beef and rice, but maybe we'll come up with a name. It's beef, rice, and bone broth. It's like a weekly go-to. It's really easy. Ashley generally makes it. And when she makes it, it's always better than when I make it. Always. Always. Well, let me tell you guys a secret. Okay, I'm going to tell you a secret about my relationship with my wife. Ashley always orders better than me, and always, like, finds the right food when we order out better than me, and always cooks way better than me. Like, it's just always, like, no matter where we're at, no matter what we do, she always chooses the better option. And it's like, I don't know how she does it. So now she's gotten to the point where, like, we'll be out and we'll order something. I'm just going to order the exact same thing as her because it's just consistently, she just does it better, dude. I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but you got the Khalipa rice and beef. That's my go-to if you want to have a bulk, a one meal that you could have throughout the duration of your day.
Dude, it's so easy to just prep rice and ground beef, and it's like, like a bodybuilder staple. The one thing that I would add to that we do that I just like, I feel behooved to share this because I think it's such a hack is, Sam Miller, we had him on the podcast. This will probably come out after this episode, but talking about the importance of not just, getting protein and the stuff that we talk about, but the micronutrients and a lot of the vitamins and minerals that we need and our kids need to just like flourish. And a lot of that does come from like vegetables and stuff, but a simple thing that you could do or anyone can do that's listening to the whole like, oh, rice, ground beef, so easy. We buy, and there's a lot of companies that sell this, or if you process your own meat, like you can have a butcher kind of do this, but they do organ blend ground beef where it's just 10% of like liver, kidney, heart. And there's just so like without going like full carnivore, like and that side and that craziness side of it, like you don't have to have raw liver like Liver King, but there is so many important vitamins and minerals in organ meat specifically. And if you get these ground beef blends,
right?
It's not cheaper. But if you get these ground beef blends that have just 10% of that, you can't even taste it. Like it doesn't have, because I know it's off-putting sometimes, like the liver taste is a little bit of an acquired taste. So if you get these ground beef blends, that's the only ground beef that we eat at our house. So whenever the kids are eating ground beef, they're getting some organ meat. Whenever I'm eating ground beef, and it doesn't make a difference. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's so worth it because of the nutrients that it packs. So that would be one way that I would elevate the Khalipa bowl is if you do some organ blend every now and then. Because it honestly, like, unless you can't tell a difference.
Yeah. Okay. So we got to elevate the Khalipa bowl. I don't know if we're going to call it that, but
whatever you end up calling
the name
it.
The name is tentative, but the idea there is the reason why I like it is it's just super simple, dude. Like it's like you got your rice, you got your ground beef, and Caden likes it too. And so for breakfast, I can mix it with eggs. In the afternoon, I can mix it with cheese if I wanted to. Typically, I won't eat it for dinner, but it's great for breakfast and lunch because you could add different things to it. It's like your base. And it makes me feel pretty like satiated, pretty full, especially because of the bone broth in there. It's a little bit it's great. So that's the nutrition hack of the week. I wanted to, so I had a story, but I think where we should go. Did I ever talk on the podcast yet about the sheriff's department? Did I ever finish that? Did we ever talk about it when I did?
No. You talked about it briefly in the home team episode, but you didn't give us the full download on, what you were going to do, where you were going to be like the last stage of this. I forget the name of it, but
yeah, that's why.
Go ahead.
Let me pull it up. So for those of you who didn't hear in the previous episodes, on early March, I got a notification from a buddy of mine that says, "Hey, we have sustained resistance coming up at the end of the month." So it was a month from them. This is a high stress, physically demanding, simulated fight for recruits going through. Do you have any interest in coming out with the ground fighting portion? Naturally, and we shared this on the podcast, my response was, absolutely. Just tell me when and where, basically. So he tells me the details. I say, okay, roger that. I'll be there. I ended up bringing Caden with me as well because I wanted him to see the experience. So we show up at this sustained resistance. At this point, when we're recording this, I don't know, it was probably, a week ago? It was a week ago. And we show up at the sheriff's department, and I wasn't familiar with this. I had never had any exposure to it. We do a lot of work with law enforcement. We've been to a lot of events, but I've never witnessed anything like this. This was like absolutely incredible. Like incredible. It was incredible, dude. I mean, I'm so glad Caden got to go there. He was a little bit, like, after a while, he's like, all right. He just kind of went off in the corner, and I think he was like playing some like game on iPad or something because we were there for a while, right? But essentially what would happen is I show up and I see this guy who's pretty fit and he's just out. I mean, dude, just like laying on the ground. Medics are like taking care of him. Like not like in a bad way, but like the medics were just like checking on him and making sure he was okay. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's like, this is that kind of event. And so sure enough, I go in there and I watch the action, dude. And they have these guys. So in the beginning of the academy, I went and spoke to this academy. And so they already knew who I was because I had developed a rapport with them that I had spoke more about fitness, and I had taught them some like basic fundamentals in strength conditioning. So I get there and I get the kind of run of show. And there's 44 recruits, 44 academy people, and probably about 50 more cadre or instructors or law enforcement there. So there's a lot of people. I mean, there's like 100 people there. And dude, these guys, their final thing is they run around the block And as they're running, they have to like make calls on the radio. So essentially like they're making radio calls like, hey, I don't know, doing this. And they're yelling at the person like, stop, XYZ department, stop. And they're having like make calls and run at the same time. So they run like, I don't know, maybe 400 meters, maybe a little bit more. And they have to jump over a wall, pretty decent wall, get up and over it. This is for men and women, by the way. It's all the same. So then they come in and then they have to fight a red man. And this is super interesting. So they'll have one of the law enforcement officers in like kind of like a suit, right? Like a suit. And they have a baton and they're giving instructions like, hey, do this. And then when the other officer comes at him, boom, they try and hit him. And the other officer is wearing boxing gloves. So they're like, dude, it's a full out fight. It is wild, right? And from there, they then go to the ground. And on the ground, the officer needs to create distance by doing like some basic like drills where they put their foot up so that the bad guy doesn't take their back. And so they're doing this for like a few minutes. And then finally then, like you get called in. And that's where you get to mount them and you get to take their gun. So, dude, but it was just fascinating to watch these people. And in general, dude, they did really, 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 really well. But the whole sequence was probably like maybe, I don't know, 8 minutes of just like aggressive fighting. Because they want to mimic like if you're in this fighting situation. So you go from running to fighting to on the ground to getting mounted to somebody taking your gun. That's like the sequence. And then you end up handcuffing them. But I have more to share, but I'll pause there for a second. It was incredible.
I mean, it sounds like exactly what it needs to be because, at the end of the day, and we've talked about this in relation to like performance with athletics too, even that can't simulate like what it actually is when, you know that you're not in a training scenario, right? Like, that, hey, this could potentially go really south. You don't know what the suspect has. You don't know who else might be there. Like there's a level of certainty at these trainings that obviously nothing you described is comfortable, but there's a comfort in that, like, okay, obviously I'm not going to die here.
Right.
Like, obviously I'm not going to, like nothing terrible is going to happen. So, I mean, it sounds like it's as close to that stuff as you can get. And you can take this conversation a variety of ways. I know that recently there's been, some controversy when I know that a couple of videos came out of like, I forget if it was like Navy SEAL training or it was some special forces, but videos come out of like what these events actually look like. And there's like uproar. There's like, oh my God, that's crazy. That's terrible. But you think about it and it's like, well, I mean, how do you prepare?
What do you want to look like?
Exactly. Like so this can't be like something that's like gentle or safe or whatever. Like this should be something that, but then the argument is then, obviously
what if
that
somebody
leaked,
gets,
so that's different.
Right.
But no, but it's kind of like, maybe people shouldn't know, or like, it's not something that like should be put out there because
it's right on the edge.
The average
Gabe.
person just won't understand, like, or shouldn't understand, but this is what is required to prepare people for the kind of shit that they have to do that I think we all take for granted living in this country that is happening in many ways to keep us safe, in many ways to like, whether you agree with, some stuff or not, like a lot of that stuff is necessary to some extent. Mm-hmm. And maybe we're just better off, or some people are better off, like not seeing how the sausage is made,
Well, the best way to describe it is like someone's like, dude, we need to have these guys know what it feels like to be in a fight before they actually get in their first fight on the street. And it's like, that is like as simple and as baseline as what they're trying to accomplish. We need these guys to know what this feels like so that it's not even if, it's when this happens on the street, they're more prepared for it. You know what I mean? And to your point, people don't understand the context. That's why, I mean, I didn't film anything, nor I don't think it would have been appropriate for me to film for a variety of reasons. One is, by the time they got to me, they were so smoked. Like there was no honor in what I was like, meaning like there's no honor in taking somebody's mount who just went 7 minutes of doing other stuff and then you take his gun. It's not like, we're not doing that for like, likes on the internet. We're doing it because we're trying to train. But to your point, I think that you're absolutely right. I do think there are some situations where people just don't want to see how the sausage, like they don't want to know. They don't. At the end of the day, it's like these people are signing up for a very dangerous, very meaningful career that is very, very necessary. And this is part of the job. And everyone there did everything in their power to make it as safe as humanly possible. I mean, everything was as locked in as you can get. Very clear systems, very clear everything. But at the end of the day, like, you're trying to simulate a fight. It's going to be hard, you know? But they did an excellent job. I was thoroughly impressed by how the department did, and I was honored to be a part of it. And I was also like honored to, I was really like impressed with how these recruits handled the adversity. You know, these guys were getting their asses kicked, and they handled the adversity in a really positive way. And I just hope they keep that same mindset moving through their career, you know, because right now they're probably in the best shape of their life.
You know, this is I don't know if it's a relatively small department or whatever in the grand scheme of things in the US, but it's obviously a very small snapshot of just law enforcement across the nation. Do you think that the pendulum is swinging a little bit in the other direction of more prepared recruits, like better, just more capable men and women entering the police force, better training, better stuff than what we've even talked about on the podcast, I think in some of the earlier episodes of the Train Hard or the Jason Khalipa podcast specifically, where, you know, departments like the NYPD have to like raise their minimum standard for a 1.5 mile run to something that like you could briskly walk. Like, that's the level of, you know, recruitment that's happening in some of these really big departments where, can you imagine someone that needs, you know, 11 minutes to run a 1.5 miles going through what you just described?
No, I would say that it's
right.
very.
So, I mean, do you think that things are getting better? Do you think that this is like a unique snapshot of like a department that's doing it right, but it's the exception to the rule? Like, what do you think, you know, fitness and law enforcement, now that you've had some exposure?
Dude, I've had a lot of exposure to different departments, but I think that unfortunately I'm still like drinking my own bathwater sometimes. So like, for example, I'm super connected to a group out of Idaho. We work with different types of all kinds of law enforcement here in California. We work with everybody. We work with CBP, SRT. We work with a lot of different groups. I do think it's I do think it's better, but I also think the people I'm interacting with are also under that same, like, when we're talking to chiefs who align with our same values, of course, then I think it's better, right?
Yeah.
But I do think some of that red tape is getting out of the way now. I think people are realizing that law enforcement needs to be invested into, they need to be appreciated, and they need to be trained. And I think that is becoming more and more clear for the general population. And so then it's trickling down. What's that?
Mind-blowing.
Right. And I think that that's trickling down to leadership, right? Because, so I do think it's better. But I also think that I'm in my own kind of world because I'm surrounded by a lot of different departments that are doing things really well. Like, for example, at the men's club tomorrow morning, I'll have 7 different law enforcement groups represented from the Bay Area, I'd say. And so my vantage point is you got guys from all these different departments who are just total badasses. But is that representative of the entire department? And is that representative of the United States? I don't think so, but I think it's gotten better since when we first started the podcast, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's definitely some self-selection there as well. Like, if a department or leadership is at the point where they're reaching out to you, that in itself says a lot about like where their values are, you know, how much they value fitness, preparedness, all of these things, because, you know, they're going outside of the box to find an expert, someone that can come in and talk about these things. That already says volumes about what they think is important for training their departments. So naturally, you're going to be exposed to more people that very much think this way versus I'm sure there are a lot of departments out there that, you know, have a budget and we'd be like, no, we don't need a fitness guy to come in. We don't need like any of that stuff. And I think that if you were to see what those departments look like, I think would be indicative that leadership doesn't think that's important.
Right. Right. I had a guy from LAPD reach out to me this morning. He's like, hey man, my crew and I are on your app. And he was talking to me about the leaderboard a little bit. He was talking to me about the community and the new Train Hard app, the community, the videos, everything about the new Train Hard app is like badass. But we were having a conversation in particular about how him and his buddies will go on there and kind of riff on who scores on workouts. We were having a conversation about that. But yeah, man, shout out to LAPD if you guys are listening to this. Appreciate you guys' support and being on the Train Hard app. And just take a quick moment to shout out to all law enforcement out there, right? I do think I do think the tides are turning, but at the end of the day, just know that you have big supporters here on our podcast and on the Train Hard app. There's a lot of people because I think that we need you guys, and I just want to say thanks. And I'm fired up to get my reserve. I'm on the path, but I'm waiting for the class to open up, and I'm gonna share stories about the reserve every time we podcast once it happens.
That'll be fun.
That will be fun. But anyways, to close out the loop on that incredible experience, I'd feel comfortable with any of those people trying to help me out if I was in a tough situation. But I do think that when it came to the ground, I do think a lot of the officers realized just how important technique is. And they were taught only a very basic foundations on the ground, because for them, you got to figure if you get to the ground, a lot of other things have gone wrong to get to that point. But if you are on the ground, to be able to get out of it, I think is really important. I think that was eye-opening for the group, because in general, it just went to show like we had 4 people that were the bad guys, and we were all relatively more advanced in jiu-jitsu. And, one of the guys was there. He'd only been doing jiu-jitsu for 2 years. And you could just see the difference between the guy who's done jiu-jitsu for 2 years and compared to the recruits who hadn't done any. It's just night and day. So if you are thinking about getting into some form of, self-defense, I do think even a year of jiu-jitsu, like you're talking about a year of flex can make a difference in the way you look. A year of jiu-jitsu can dramatically change. And then once you get that, if you decide to pause or stop, at least you have a good framework.
Let me ask you one more question about, this specific training that you described, because I think that, and I'm speaking completely out of my butt here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but are some of these things that are that intense and that obviously important, are those happening in the recruit getting starting level? And then what's the expectation of doing it again 2 years in, 4 years in, 6 years in? Because I think that that's where, and again, I'm assuming this based off of just my outsider's assumption, but I would assume that, and again, no fault to, very busy LEO people, but you have a family, you have a career, it's a stressful job. How many times are they having to revisit something this intense? Because it's not like you're only going to get potentially into a fight your first year in the service.
They're not. That's the problem. So my feedback for them was dude, we should be doing this once a month. I mean, obviously that's an extreme case, but
anything's better than maybe what the level of repetition is happening now.
What I witnessed was so incredibly remarkable. And it should occur on a more regular basis. Once a month, it was extreme, obviously. But I do think getting exposure to that type of stuff is so important. The issue becomes, I think if you talk to most law enforcement, they'll say the same thing. It just becomes very, I don't know if bureaucratic is the right term, but as people get in, let's just say you get hired on, unless you move to a different department or a different unit, you're not tested again on your fitness in most departments, which is pretty mind-boggling if you think about it.
It is insane.
It is, because it's such an important part of your job. So I do think, though, in the future, I think you're going to see a shift, man. I think the culture is going to continue to shift. I think that people are going to realize that having other partners that are fit it matters. And so, but to answer your question, I'd love to see, departments doing that every 6 months. I'm actually so there's a Gracie combatives for law enforcement, and I think it's a week-long course. I'm planning on doing it. And the difference between that is you'll learn how to utilize handcuffs and whatnot. And so I want to go through it so I could then donate my time and teach other people that. So I'll keep you posted on that one. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to talk about that. All right.
You've been posting about this book, 3 podcasts in a row. You make the note about this book. I want to hear about this book.
Okay. So I'm holding this book up. If you're listening to this or watching this on camera, it's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. So I want to just break down. So I'm about 3/4 of the way done. I do think this book probably could have been half or less than half. It's a lot of the way the author does it.
It's a meeting that could have been an email.
Yeah. It's a meeting that could have been an email. It's very much so written in I'm 100% right and everybody's wrong. Oh, so just to clear that up. But what I liked about it, and Dan Bailey sent me this, is that the title is I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And I really sat on that for a while. And I said, what does that mean? And basically the author goes into detail in saying that whether you're an atheist or a Christian or a Muslim or you name the religion, no matter who you are, there has to be a certain level of faith to align with that principle. So if you say, I'm an atheist, I believe that there is no higher being, there is no God, there is none of this or whatever, then what he writes in this book is that to make that claim, you have to dismiss all of these other things. And he brings up a bunch of stuff that basically validates Christianity that an atheist would have to say, no, I do not believe that. And so that's why he says you have to have so much faith to be an atheist, is basically his argument. And I wanted to bring up this book because no matter where you sit on these subjects, I found this book so far to be super interesting. I don't care what religion you are or no religion you are. I just found it to be eye-opening. And in particular, he goes into a variety of things. And I've taken notes, and you can't see it on camera, but I've taken notes and I've highlighted a bunch of stuff. But essentially, he starts off by claiming about the universe. And he says that there's 3 principles, and he dives into these like really in depth. But number 1, scientific evidence overwhelmingly confirms that the universe exploded into being out of nothing. Either someone created something out of nothing, the Christian view, or no one created something out of nothing, the atheistic view. Which view is more reasonable? The Christian view. Which view requires more faith? The atheistic view. So he goes into like, and I just thought this was really, so that's 1. The simplest life form contains the information equivalent to 1,000 encyclopedias. Christians believe only an intelligent being can create a life form containing the equivalent of 1,000 encyclopedias. Atheists believe non-intelligent natural forces can do it. Christians have evidence to support blah, 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 blah. This is point 3. Hundreds of years beforehand, ancient writings foretold the coming of a man who would actually be God. This man, God, it was foretold, would be born in a particular city from a particular bloodline, suffer in a particular way, die at a particular time, and rise from the dead at a particular time. And then he goes in to say, immediately after this predicted time, multiple eyewitnesses proclaimed, later recorded, those eyewitnesses endured, blah, blah, blah. So then he says, having seen this evidence from creation, God exists, he points at Christians believe. So he goes into basically saying like, you know what I'm saying? He breaks down like, this is what was told. This is a Christian view. This is the atheist view. And he just does a really good job of opening your eyes to different things. And I would encourage people to take a look at it. I have more on that. I have one more thing I wanted to share on it, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, how has it impacted, kind of your faith and where you are, with a lot of these things? And I don't know, what has it changed in kind of your perspective on these things?
I think what it's done is okay, I don't know. I don't know if it's really changed anything, but it's been eye-opening to read through and be like, huh. Like it's kind of giving me that like, huh. Like I'll give you an example. The moral law is our third argument for the existence of a theistic God. This is like this guy's talking about, right? It looks like this. Every law has a lawgiver. There is a moral law. So he goes into talking about how people just know there's like a moral law. Like people know right and wrong. Where did that come from? Like people just know right and wrong. Like, if you ask them, they know that like Mother Teresa was good and Hitler was bad. Like they just know like there's a moral code that like killing somebody is bad. You know what I mean? Like where did that come from? And so he says every law has a lawgiver. There is a moral law. Therefore, there is a moral lawgiver. And so that was like it just made me kind of like think. It made me think. And I think that books that make you think are helpful. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up on the podcast. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And I think it's made me think more and get closer to where I'm navigating as my faith journey continues on.
And I think that, maybe we can talk more about this when you digest, but I'm curious, like, it's made you think more, but, think what about where you are, about like, is this the route that I want to go? Like, have you ever considered yourself an atheist? Have you ever considered yourself someone that like doesn't believe, or it's just been some like, I'm curious because what I can see is I'm sure that there are people listening to this that are either, very much, very devout with their faith and Christians, and like, obviously that requires a level of faith that like you can't tell them otherwise. And I think that is what it is. But there's also people on the other side, right? That for everything you just said, they would either have an explanation or someone they listen to that has like a very articulate way of saying, like, to me, someone that comes to mind is like someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? Like very articulate scientist who would just give you the exact definition of, well, the Big Bang happened because blah, 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 blah. Like, I think that every side has, same way you can find a study that supports everything. I feel like every side has the people they listen to that are very articulate and can describe why clearly the other side is wrong. So I'm curious, with this being something that's obviously, like you said, is super, super one-sided, it's making a very strong case for why it's crazy to think that there isn't a higher being. Like, look at all these examples of why that wouldn't be the case. How has that changed, where you've been in kind of your life? Because I know, like, I'll answer it for me, just hearing you kind of describe what the book is about. I think that there was definitely a point in my life, like early 20s, because I grew up, Catholic household, like we would go to church, but it was always like a chore. And I was never, I think, in a effective way communicated like why we're doing these things.
Yes.
It just felt like on Sunday we get dressed up, we go to church, and you have to sit there quietly.
Stand up, sit down. You say this, you do this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, so for me growing up, it was this thing that as soon as I didn't have to do it, I obviously dropped it, because I never understood, like, I mean, my mom was very, very like, you should be grateful. And, that's why we go and that's why we pray and all of these things. But, to any extent further than that, it really just felt like something that like we had to do that honestly I didn't enjoy doing. So I would say that for a while, once like, I left home, I definitely had this, I don't know if you would have asked me then if I would have been like, I am an atheist, but everything to me was just like a coincidence or like needed to be explained with like very clear logic. Like I would have read a book like this then and been like, dude, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. And I think that, through having kids, through maturing, through having a family, and honestly through meeting my wife, Ariel, because Ariel's never, like when we met, she wasn't religious, but she was always someone that I would describe as very spiritual in many ways, like very like, the universe kind of like brought us together, and like, the universe, like you can manifest, like she's always been very on that side of things. And that changed my perspective on, okay, maybe there is something else that's going on aside from just like, our actions, and those have consequences, and living in this like very scientific, logical world. And I think that now hearing stuff like this, and I'm curious to read the book, just continues to point me in that direction, especially given just a lot of the things that we've talked about on the podcast, with just like starting the podcast, the guests that we have, like, how I feel now when I do praying with my son, and that being something that if you would have told me 2 years ago that I was going to do, I would have been like, you're crazy. And now it's like one of the things that I'm most, I wouldn't even say looking forward to, but feels most natural for me to do and do with him. So that's how, and I haven't read the book, but that's how I would explain what something like that would impact me. It would just be another sign of,
that's what it is.
Oh, this taps into my like logical 20-year-old brain that I had, and explains to me why all these things that I'm feeling might be founded on something more real than just me changing my mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you summarized it really well. And dude, I think a lot of people listening to this podcast probably maybe got raised the same way. Like, dude, stand up, sit down, do this, do that. And there was no connection, right? There was no connection. It was a thing you did. And I thinking about it more like you got to resonate with the message. You have to be aligned on a shared values. You have to believe in this journey, right? And I think that at least growing up for me, it just wasn't that way. Now I think what I'm searching for, and what I've been doing more of, like for example, in the mornings, I read the Bible every morning, and I'm not here to like, I'm not at a point where I'm like gonna like, like I'm just sharing on this podcast, and I hope that people can listen to this and be like, dude, these guys just being authentic and real and like talking about their journey. And for me, I think that anyone would be better off just like, dude, just take some time and think through where your faith is at least like take moments in time to sit and settle on that. And I think books like this start to open your mind up more, start to pull you in a little bit more like on the analytical side. And then when you start reading some of these documents and you start thinking about it more, and maybe for you might be like, dude, I don't want to have a relationship with God. That's not interesting to me. Okay, cool. Go do your thing, man. I'm just sharing with you that when I read books like this, when I read the Bible, I feel like I'm learning more about myself. And for that, like, That's why I'm doing it. And I don't know where it's going though. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not here to like champion anything other than I think that we're on a journey and we're going to continue to share it because I feel like many other people are on this same journey and it would be foolish for us not to share that we're on one as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, this is something that even months ago, despite, how long I have been praying with Shay in the mornings, and sometimes I just feel like compelled to do it early in the mornings when I'm alone outside running, and I just do, and doing it out loud has been a game changer. I wouldn't even have brought that up on the podcast, I think months ago, because there is this like, I don't even know if it like resistance,
like
discomfort, like it sounds, I don't know, it sounds phony. It sounds, I don't know, but the one thing that I'll share, and I think that this is a good example too of how I still kind of like, maybe 1 foot in, 1 foot out on this stuff is, to me, one thing that is like black and white just convinced me that this is something that is incredibly beneficial for me is I've always known and appreciated, anyone listening to this podcast knows, like I love listening to like the Atias, the Hubermans of the world. Like what can I do to like improve my health and improve everything I do? And I know that mindfulness and gratitude is just, it's proven, like doing some sort of like meditation, mindfulness, like these things will make you happier, healthier. They'll help with mental health, stress levels, hormones, all that stuff. And I have never, ever been able to stay consistent with journaling, with a meditation app, like you name the thing, I've tried it. I do it for a week and I just fall off. Once that turned into prayer and once that turned into like talking to God. And again, like if you were to ask me like, are you like, what religion are you? I don't even know. Like, I don't know what I would like label myself. Like, I don't know.
Right.
But once it turned into that, I haven't missed a day. And
that's interesting. I can relate to that. I can relate to that.
So and again, it's us sharing honestly what is a vulnerable topic. I mean, I know it is for me, like it feels uncomfortable for me, but that's what I can share, man. Like once it turned into that, it's I haven't missed a day. So
dude, it's funny because we're just sharing. I don't think there's anybody that's going to listen and be like, oh, fuck these guys. They're just like, it's like, dude, they're probably like, all right.
Or they might be, and then they can go kick rocks.
Yeah, or maybe they are, right? I mean, dude, this show will forever be about talking about topics in our life, learning from other people, and trying to level ourselves up. And if this is a part of that, and this is part of that journey, we're going to share it. Because I think that if it provides value to us, it's probably going to provide value to someone out there. And that's what we're about. So something to kind of marinate on, again, I just want to kind of, before we move on, and we will move on, is just think about this for a second. The moral law, right? So what would be the argument for moral law? Like, for example, how did we over time start to feel right and wrong? Like, how did we feel that? And you can make the argument that if we didn't feel that, the race wouldn't continue because everybody would just kill each other. I guess that would be the debate, right?
So yeah, if you were to steel man the argument of why this came up just through evolution, it's because because I think that the steel man argument of the other side is like, I think we can't fathom with our brains, like what thousands and thousands of years of evolution looks like. Like it is so much time. Like I think when we think of these things just happening naturally, we think like what's a long time for us, and a long time for us is whatever, 20, 30 years. And like, we can't fathom what thousands of years looks like. So I would imagine the argument on the other side of it would be, over time, the societies, the groups of people that flourished were groups of people that were obviously like, I'm not going to kill you. You're not going to kill me. We're not going to steal. We're going to raise a family unit. Like all these things that are traditional, like moral principles were kind of born out of necessity for like, my group, my tribe is going to grow and flourish, and we're going to propagate the earth because we've figured out that stuff like killing each other, raping each other, stealing from each other are unhelpful for us to grow. Whereas like the people over there that are doing all these things are terrible. It's not sustainable. That would be the argument, right?
Yeah.
And I think it like kind of makes sense if you think about it, but that would be the other side of it. It came out of necessity.
Yeah, dude.
It's interesting though. Yeah.
Because if there's a moral code, that feels like it's imprinted on your heart, then if there's a law, then there has to be a lawmaker, right? You know what I mean? Anyways, what were we going to, Snapchat and protecting your kids from themselves, and then the Q&A about divorce. Where do you want to go to finish this up?
So really quick, just revisiting the mask, one thing that I appreciate about the conversations that we have is that I hope that you know that I like take to heart. I've gotten a lot of messages about the like definition that I wrote down for what provide means for me. And that strictly came out of like me and you riffing on the topic, like maybe potentially getting like a little fiery on like, disagreeing about some stuff, some people messaging me and like that forcing me to like really think about it and maybe refine what it is I was trying to say, what I meant. And that's how that came out. And a lot of people have messaged me and I really, really appreciate it. And that means a lot to me because I put a lot of thought into that as like the North Star for me for what it means to be a provider. On the same note, I thought a lot about what you said last time where we talked about this whole like, masculinity being under attack and like, is that really something that's happening real world? Or is that something that is like very prevalent on social media, digitally? And is that the only reason that I feel this way? Because I completely agree that that is true when it comes to other topics. Like you can just look at Instagram and make it seem like, the world's on fire, but, in real life, that might not be true. So, thinking about that, the two things that came in, and one is a funny story, but the other thing is like, I have most definitely seen, and we don't have to go into it in depth here, but like recently stuff posted, and I think what makes it real is that it's stuff posted by like people that me and you know, like common, like, acquaintances, even like colleagues that we've had that have posted stuff with the type of message that I think is prevalent and is very counterproductive to men. Stuff like, working out and like, you being so focused on yourself, like all that, like, toxic masculinity stuff. Like, I do think that maybe you don't see it in your immediate group because I think you've, have a very healthy immediate group. I don't see it in person. So that's why when you ask me, like, have you experienced that? And I thought about it. I was like, no, I guess I haven't. But again, we've purposely put ourselves in a community where the stuff that we don't want to see isn't present. But having said that, whether it's digitally or not, I think the thing that really does make me feel like this is still a problem and it's still a problem that's very common is because it's happening from people that like we both know and we both have interacted with in person that like clearly believe this stuff enough to like share it and put it out there. So that's thing one. Thing two, and this is a little bit of a funny story, but it's like, it doesn't get any more real world than this. So I went to like a pretty like geeky high school in New York. So I went to Hunter College High School. So for anyone that knows the high schools like in New York, there's like the specialized high schools. There's like Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech, whatever. And Hunter is, I mean, I'm biased, but probably the best one out of all of them. It's on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And it's a very, very old school. And it used to be an all-women school. So historically, it used to be all women, I think until the 70s. I meant to look it up, but it was an all-girl school. And then it turned into a co-ed high school. And every 5 years, we have a big high school reunion where all the classes from there was like, I mean, it goes back like, I think there was a lady there that was like 90 years. She was the first one to speak. So they have this assembly where they have the classes that are celebrating their 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40-year high school anniversary. They have them there. And every class sends out someone to give up a speech. To give a speech just about like the impact Hunter had on them and, whatever. And it's a big like kind of like fundraising event. And when was it? It must have been 2019. Yeah, 2019. That was my 10-year high school reunion. I went and I gave the speech for my graduating class. And the thing that a friend told me who had gone to these in the past is that you go up, and because it used to be an all-girls school, all the first, people that go up, because they go in backwards order. So the first person that gives a speech is like the person celebrating their like 55th year high school reunion. They go up, they give their speech, whatever. But it gets to the point where the school becomes co-ed, and all of a sudden, it's mostly men that go up and give the speeches for whatever reason. Like, I was just asked to do it. I'm sure other people were asked and I was happy to do it. Maybe men more likely want to do it, whatever reason. But it kind of switches and it ends up being a lot of guys. And the women that are there start booing the guy that's up there giving their speech before he even says anything. And that made me super nervous because I was going to be one of the last ones. I'm just celebrating my 10-year grad and I'm a guy. And a lot of this plays into, again, the high school is on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It's like super.
The 2019 you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2019. Super liberal, like super, like that's the world that high school lives in. So it's not surprising, but like imagine my feeling back then when I was also like a little bit younger, to feel like just because I am a guy, I'm going to go up there and get booed before I even say anything, before I open a word, just because there's this like belief that, well, why are only guys speaking once it becomes a co-ed school versus like it being perfectly okay that this used to be an all girls school. And I remember that being something that like when I heard that, I was like, man, like, do I even want to go up there and give the speech? And I ended up doing it and it ended up being fine. I think a part of it too was I gave this speech about, because at the time Hunter was getting a lot of criticism for lacking diversity because it has very high Asian and white population and very few Black and Hispanic kids. And that, during that time was a huge, very controversial thing because it was like, well, should the entrance exams be allowing more people? And there's this whole thing about affirmative action. And so I went up as, a Hispanic guy, like one of the 3 that were in my graduating class. And I gave this speech about like, I know that I think we can do better when it comes to diversity, but I actually saw a lot of diversity at Hunter while I was there and focused on the fact that there was a lot of diversity of opinion and like people were able to like talk about different things. And it was actually pretty, well received. But I do remember having that feeling of like, man, you get booed just for being a guy?
Yeah.
Like,
and my pushback there would be like, that was 2019. I do think things have changed.
I understand that. And I acknowledge
when
we talked about it before that the pendulum has swung in the wrong direction. But I think to say that isn't still something that's very real and is a very big issue. And it's something that honestly for me,
sometimes I worry, like you and I, we debate this all the time because I don't want to put out a message that isn't what reflects what I see. And what I see is I engage with more guys and more women than almost anybody I know. And I think that it's really important that when we put out a message online, yes, it reflects our views, but like, are your views representative of most people? Like, is it relatable to other people? Right. And
I think that this is very relatable. And I think that, I didn't want to bring it back up to like, hash out the fact, like we can agree to disagree. All I wanted to do was when you asked me like, hey, have you seen this? I thought about it because I think it's a really good point. And I don't want to have my worldview be 100% impacted by just the online world, because I agree that can magnify things that are negative and not make it true. But I thought about it and dude, it is very real and it is incredibly real and very problematic in certain pockets of the country and very much not an issue in other pockets. It's a big reason we live where we live. It's a big reason we love the state of Texas and we moved here. But to say that like isn't an issue and it's because you talk to a lot of guys and a lot of women, again, that I think are very much catered and selected to people that you want to, relate to. I think that that to me is not something that I think is what's indicative of what's going on. I still think it's a big issue. And without like going out and like looking for a podcast or looking something, just came out and I'll send you the link on Diary of a CEO, which one of the podcasts that I really enjoy. That right now they have an episode. I just started it, so I didn't want to get into it too much, but with Scott Galloway, he talks a lot about the issues in men a lot. And then he's co-guest with an executive at Hinge, and Hinge being a dating app, and they're talking about everything that I'm talking about, and like super, super in depth. And dude, and again, like I think it's important to acknowledge that there's a lot of uphill battles right now for men in the US, because I think that it's counterproductive to me as a father of a son to like bury my head in the sand and pretend they're not there. But I don't want to like add more fuel to that fire and make it seem like, well, then he should just be a victim because it's so hard. No, I just think you should acknowledge the fact that like there are very big groups that believe these things and you need to be aware that they're there and overcome them. That's it. But yeah,
my feedback to you is like really simple, is like, and this is something I deeply reflect on, is not just the position of like, so for example, this Hinge, or like big picture data is super interesting to me, because no matter what, you have your vantage point. I mean, you've told me yourself, dude, you live in the middle of, not in the middle of nowhere, but you don't have tons of social, you've said this yourself, like on your interactions, dude, you consume a lot of information and you learn a lot, right? And sometimes I worry, and this goes for myself too, that we're consuming and we're learning, and it just feeds us more of consuming and learning what we already are gravitating towards. This is something I reflect on a lot. And
For sure.
so I try and intentionally try and expose myself through all the different, variables I have, and just be aware of it. And I think that when you hear someone like a Hinge or something, that'd be interesting, because like, dude, what's the dating scene looking like for guys right now? And what's happening there? Like, that's cool data. You know what I mean?
And I'll send you the podcast and you should listen to it and we should talk about it, because yeah, it's real, man. Like,
yeah, because then you're not talking about some of, you're talking about the sum, like
for sure,
the sum of, right?
For sure.
And I just think that when we talk about masculinity, or we talk about the issues that men are facing, I think that when you talk about time and commitments and stress and family, I think all those, dude, are super relatable like crazy. What isn't relatable for me is I've never felt like the victim. I haven't. Like, I've never felt like the world is out.
But it's not. But it's not feeling like the victim. I've never felt like the victim either. Even in that example that I gave, if anything, I felt like it was. I remember this vividly. Once my friend told me that, I went back and revisited my speech and put so much more work into it and practiced it so many more times, because the fact that I knew that I was going to go in, and just because I was a guy, the audience, or a lot of that audience, was going to feel a certain way, I just knew that I needed to do better. Like, to me, like, taking that and feeling as a victim would have been like, oh, I don't want to do it anymore, or doing a shitty job and then just blaming it because, like, well, the audience like didn't want to hear from me anyway. I didn't do that. What I did was I was like, all right, this is going to be an uphill battle. They're not going to go in there and be like, yay, like another guy giving a speech. They're going to be like, another guy giving a speech. So I had to do something that was good. And I had to like maybe put in a little extra work than if it was like an even playing field. But that's, I think, where maybe you're misunderstanding me. But I don't think that it's like, oh, like, I'm a guy, things are so hard for me because, masculinity is under attack. It's no, like, I think masculinity in general isn't appreciated in the way that it should be. So what can we do about that? I think that we can elevate what masculinity means. I think that I can be an example of that with my family, with the community, on this podcast, what I put out on social media, and hopefully inspire other men to do the same, because that's the only way that we're going to change what people think about masculinity, by being really fucking masculine, positive men, so that everyone that thinks that masculinity is an issue is going to change their mind because they have so many inspiring, positive examples to do it. That's what I'm trying to get. It's not like this is so hard for me being a guy, so we should like complain about it. No, we should acknowledge it and then be better to solve the issue.
Yeah.
It's not victim mentality at all. I hate that shit. It's not that. It's acknowledge that it's an issue, acknowledge that there are, headwinds as a guy. There are headwinds as a woman too. They're different. You should just acknowledge they exist and then be better to overcome them. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I just don't know if I see as much of the masculinity part that you're bringing up as a hurdle. You know what I mean? I don't know if I see that. I don't know if people feel that way right now, but maybe they used to, and maybe there's some pockets of it. But I think the overwhelming majority of people that I know, or at least connect with online, dude, they want guys to be guys. They want they want everyone, But dude, I get it. It's an ongoing debate between us, and I think it's meaningful, because at the end of the day, man, we're on the same path. At Train Hard, we have one mission. It's to help more men train, protect, and provide, and to level up. Period. That's the goal. That's the mission. And like, whether Gabe and I debate about, whatever, we're on the same shared vision of where we're trying to go.
And another real world example that's brought up on the podcast that I'll share with you, that Scott Galloway brings up, is in these workplaces. So like, you go to like Goldman Sachs or like these big corporations and stuff that are stressful job environments. They all have women's groups built into the organization for women's support. They all have. And not only do they not have men's groups that the actual corporation support, if men start to get together, it's seen as a problem. It's seen as like, there's a boys club and like whatever. Whereas both women getting together and men getting together are incredibly important. I mean, you know this more than anything. And they're not supported in the workplace. They're not supported even, like, you can argue, in universities. Like, men getting together is seen as a potential issue. It's seen as dangerous. It's seen as like boys club. It's seen as being exclusive. Whereas like women getting together is seen as empowering. It's seen as positive. It's seen as like a safe space. And this exists everywhere. And it's places that our children are going to go to. Like Shay is going to go to a university where this discrepancy exists. He might get a job where this discrepancy exists.
Yeah, I mean, I want to listen to that show because, again, my vantage point is that we put out a viral video about the men's club and it's got nothing but, it's got 50,000 shares on it from nothing but people saying, dude, this is the bomb. But if there's a company, for example, that's not supporting those things, I want to know about it. That's interesting to me. 100%.
But that's the thing. And it's, I mean, I'm sure that, you know, you can see this even in just like Bay Area companies. Like this is just, it's how it is. Like there is, you know, there doesn't seem the need to be like an Apple men's group. Whereas like, I'm sure there's an Apple women's group. And like, why is that? And is that really helping both sides as much as it should?
Well, we should find out because I have a lot of friends at all these companies. We did have a Q&A. This one, we put a pepper next to it. I don't know if I'd call it a pepper, but I do have opinions on this. And so the Q&A came in. It says, do you think too many people, quote unquote, give up and get divorced without working to save it? So that's a very pointed question with a very specific term, give up. So I just want to make sure we acknowledge that. Does marriage mean less now? Put yourself in someone else's shoes who feels as though their partner has changed post-marriage. So I want to address the end of it and then we can come back to the beginning. Put yourself in someone else's shoes who feels as though their partner has changed post-marriage. For clarity's sake, I believe that if your partner has not changed post-marriage at some point in time, that's also uncommon, right? Now, the word change is difficult to understand, right? Because there's a lot of ways you could change, but people are going to change. My wife and I met at 15. I'm about to be 40. I hope I have changed. I hope in a more positive way. So I think that it's important to break down this question. Do you think too many people give up and get divorced without working to save it? Does marriage mean less now? So I just want to acknowledge the fact that I don't think it's necessarily bad for people to change. I think they should, but they have to change in a way that's in alignment with the shared vision of their marriage, right? Now, full disclosure, I met my wife at 15. We've been married for 17 years. Gabe's been married for what? How long have you been married for?
5 years this year, man.
Let's go. 5 years. And we have not experienced a divorce. And so I want to make sure that I acknowledge that because, dude, it is super complicated. And there are so many, I know a lot of people have gone through the experience. But this question came in. We'll tackle it in our best way. Where do you want to start?
I mean, I think this is another thing they brought up in the podcast I was just listening to because it was one of the early statistics of, you know, divorces statistically are going up. And that's something that you hear about a lot. There's so much more divorce now than there used to be. So the first part of the question, do you think too many people give up and get divorced without working to save it? I wouldn't say give up because I think that has a negative connotation, but I think the black and white thing is more people are getting divorced. And I think that that's, you know, a result of many things. I think that now it's kind of like one of those things where, you know, women are working, men are working, like it could potentially just be easier where like we can split and that, you know, doesn't have the impact it had before where women felt like, you know, hey, I need to stay in this relationship just to be supported. So maybe that has something to do with it. The give up part is tough, but the one thing that this question kind of reminded me of was Jordan Peterson has this video and I don't want to butcher the quote, but he says that a divorce is, and then he has this huge number. It's like 50,000 little fights that never happened. And he explains that to say that if you're in a relationship, there's going to be friction. There's going to be disagreements. There's going to be things that bother you. There's going to be things that whatever. And if you address it in the moment, the little thing, you can come up with a resolution. You can figure out like what the middle ground is and grow together because of it. And the reason he comes out with like 50,000 or whatever the number is, I forget the number, is because he says, imagine that you have like one little disagreement a day or one little disagreement a week. And then you take that and you multiply that over 10 years. That means that you've had these many disagreements. And if you get to that point and you never address them, that's where like then the chasm becomes so big that there is no option, there is no resolution, but it's because you didn't do the thing 10 years ago of addressing all the little things and coming up with these little resolutions, because in large part, people avoid conflict. You don't want to have tough conversations. You don't want to potentially be vulnerable. I know that those things are very hard. So for me, what I take from that video is that it's not so much like, I just give up and that's going to lead to a divorce. I think that if you're not very proactive from the beginning, because marriage is very hard and it's going to require a lot of give and take. You're going to have to change in ways that maybe you wouldn't on your own, but you're changing for your partner. I think if you're doing the little bit of work from the beginning, you can avoid having to do so much work at a point where like things have gotten so messy that it's easier to give up at that point because it seems so impossible. But you can hopefully avoid getting to that point if you're just constantly dealing with the little things head on and never avoiding conflict at all costs, never avoiding tough conversations at all costs. I think that to me can just avoid getting to the point where you ever are forced to like, hey, do we give up or do we work really hard to save it?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, when I think about give up, man, I don't think anybody gives up. I don't think that's the case. I don't know. I haven't been in that experience. From what I've experienced from people around me who've gotten divorced, I think if you ask them, hey, did you give up on your marriage? I think that they would be almost offended by that, in my opinion.
For sure.
I think that because that implies you didn't want to work on it. And I think you're right. I think that if when you got married, if there was something there, right? And you had aligned on all your principles, you had aligned deeply on all your principles and you guys were ready to burn the boats together. If that was your going in approach, over time, what happened? What was the wedge? Maybe it was the kids, maybe it was life, maybe it was money, maybe it was this. And I wonder if just day over day, if you don't have those difficult conversations, yeah, they start to compound. And then it gets so deep where you're like, dude, like we're better off not together. And so I don't think the answer is people are giving up. I think what it is maybe they're choosing not to have the small difficult conversations. And by the time it comes to the big difficult ones, it just seems unsurmountable. And it just seems like the better option is too much animosity is built up, too much resentment has built up. And the better option for the family would be that. And the only piece I'd say to that too is like, you know, when you bring kids into the world, man, you have an obligation to do everything in your power to keep that relationship on lock. And that happens every day, not just when you guys start really having deep friction. So I think it's a good question. I don't know if, you know, your idea with like, is divorce more prevalent because maybe multiple people are working? I don't know if that one necessarily for me resonates. I don't know. I would say that maybe a reason why it could be more prevalent is that it becomes a little bit more socially acceptable. And social media makes it more, like the grass is always greener. I do think that's a piece to discuss, which is, in my opinion, the reason why divorce maybe has become more prevalent is two reasons. One, it's a little bit more socially acceptable. Two, social media has done a lot of damage to making you feel that these other relationships are perfect, or you could create connections and people could slide into your DMs or whatever. I think those two have not helped the situation.
Dude, I forget what podcast I listened to, but it was like a comedian or something. It was a while ago, but he had such a good example of just how like, yeah, social media it's just like, it's made like infidelity, like not even from like a physical perspective, but I think you would agree with this. Like there's definitely levels of infidelity that don't have to be physical at all, that like would absolutely be like cross a line and would be something that like, you know, you just wouldn't do. And yeah, man, social media just like makes it that much more accessible. And again, not that accessible is the reason why you would do something that's wrong, but obviously it's just a part of the recipe that, but I remember the comedian, the way he put it is, you know, like you follow your wife's friends on social media. And then next thing you know, she posts like a bikini picture while she's on vacation and you can just, you know, comment and be like, hey, like, where'd you go on vacation? And next thing you know, that turns into a conversation that clearly had some intent, right? Like you're almost like fishing when you send something like that because of the picture you're responding to. And that just is a slippery slope that's so much more accessible now versus like, you know, back in the day where you probably had to like, you know, go out of your way to like go like visit someone or call someone.
Write them a written letter or send them call them.
And the comedian did a much better job making that funny, but I just thought that I was like, yeah, fuck, you're right. Like it's so easy to do that shit, you know?
That's why I think people think it's more prevalent, but I don't think, and this kind of goes back to, and not to like go first circle on this, like this masculinity
go full
thing,
circle.
Just like anything, right? Like when you send out terms like, are people giving up? I think that we need to be really careful as a society, not creating these giant generalities. I think that that's a big mistake that we're falling ourselves into because of social media. That's why I love long form. Short form is very like, we had this conversation with Sam, right? Like short form, there's nothing cool about, well, you could be carnivore, but also keep in mind your gut biome or whatever it is. There's nothing cool about that. It's like, dude, carnivore or nothing. It's like, people are giving up on their marriages is like the headline, right? But there's a lot of nuance to everything. And so I think that's really important for everyone to recognize. And the final piece on marriage, and I put up a quick video last night, dude, I'm telling you, I promise every guy listening to this, prioritize going out with your lady once a week, once every 2 weeks. Prioritize it. Do it. Dude, I've been with the same girl since I was 15. We've been married for 17 years. I'm talking from experience here. We've gone through some adversity. Go out with your lady. I promise. You don't know what's going to happen, but you're just going to have good conversation, maybe bad conversation, but maybe that bad conversation needed to happen. So take me up on that and message us after you do it and be like, bro, that whole date night thing, that was a good idea. That's what I got. That's my final piece.
What I'll add to that, Jay, specifically because of the season of life that like we're in, for example, and just kind of like our interests and stuff, is I agree with you, man. Like you need to keep prioritizing, especially with young kids, because it can be so hard and seem so easy to not do, like prioritize one-on-one time. The one thing that I would add is that it doesn't have to be date night. It doesn't have to be like yesterday, stars aligned, dude. We had grandparents helping and me and Ariel got a workout in together. It was just me and her. We hit flat, and that's not going to be the case for everyone either, right? There's going to be a lot of couples out there where your wife doesn't necessarily want to work out with you, or you don't want to work out with her because you guys do different things or whatever. Like, I know that wouldn't be something that like you would particularly enjoy doing it with Ashley. Ashley definitely wouldn't want to work out with you.
She wouldn't want that to do it with me.
Exactly. No. But like me and Ariel love going in and just like literally being gym rats together. It's like the funnest thing that we do. And I've said this before, like whenever we go on trips, our must-do date when we have grandparents with us is visiting a gym and going to a coffee shop after, like 100%. I'll do that over a date night. I'll do that over going out to dinner and getting drinks, like 10 times out of 10. So all I'm saying is that's not what you need to do either. I think the takeaway here is make sure you're still prioritizing one-on-one, no kid time with your wife at every stage that you're in. Young kids, older kids, teenage kids, it doesn't matter. It's so important. Can't agree with Jason enough, but it can look however you want it to look. And I think that's important.
Dude, so make sure you're on the Train Hard app. Go hit up our community thread. Let us know how that date that you went on. Hit us up in there. Respond back to the newsletter that we send out every single week. We're not trying to be in a vacuum. We're trying to receive feedback so that we could better impact more and more people out there. It's a mission I feel very, very committed to. And I know Gabe does as well. And the rest of our team here at Train Hard. So for everybody who's been listening to the podcast, we appreciate you guys. Make sure you check out the podcast show notes for a link to the Train Hard app. Those programs are just badass. And on top of that, the community section is just lit up all the time. It is positive. It is reinforcing. And at times, I think relationships will be built. Like I sent Gabe a message this morning from a buddy of mine who said in the last 8 months, he's made 8 friends. He hasn't made 8 friends in the last 10 years, he said, because he put himself out there. He went to jiu-jitsu. He went to the men's club. He's joining us in, connecting through the Train Hard app. Like he's creating those relationships. So if you're feeling alone, dude, you don't have to. Hit us up, join our, join a gym, do whatever you got to do, but go do something. On that note, keep training hard.